Lessons for Life on a Monday night, bringing you all the up-to-date breaking news. And I can tell you that Diane Abbott has been suspended as a Labour MP after racism letter. Was it a racist letter? Was it a letter about racism? Well, let's have a little look at what Diane did. So, Tomiwa Owolade claims that Irish, Jewish and traveller people all suffer from racism. Racism in Britain is not a black and white issue, it's far more complicated. So this Tomiwa gentleman claimed that white people, such as Irish, such as some Jewish people, can be victims of racism in the same way that what you might call people of colour can. And I think I've got Pete joining me. Pete, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Are you happy to go on the screen, Pete?
Yes, no worries.
Lovely. Well, look, let's say hello to Pete.
Hi.
Great to have you with us. And welcome, firstly. I've wanted you on this channel for a long time. Really, really happy that you've jumped on. What do you make of Diane Abbott being... She's had the whip removed. I'm not sure exactly what that means in politics, but she's been chastised for daring to say that Jewish people don't suffer racism the same way as black people. But I think she's also retracted what she said since then. So the story unfolds. But what do you make of that?
Well, I heard a couple of comments which I thought were quite cogent. One was that she was being targeted because she's associated with Jeremy Corbyn, and he is not playing the game. And the other comment was that she in her list of prejudices and racisms, she neglected to mention the carrying off into slavery white people by the Barbary Muslims several hundred years ago, Barbary pirates.
Yeah,
where the men were castrated. The white men were castrated, so they couldn't have any children. So it's not only people who are not white that suffer from racism, in the past anyway.
The Barbary Coast one is a very interesting one because it does get brought up. I think slavery has existed probably in every culture at some point or another. And I'm glad that over the years it's become rarer and rarer, and gradually we've drifted away from that.
It seems to me we've got another massive problem with slavery of people trafficking now, and also children trafficking.
Modern day slavery.
Modern day slavery. So I think the problem is still there. But I think, to me, the whole problem of racism and human rights and so on is basically class. There's a statement by the House of Justice in the Promise of World Peace where they say that prejudice is anything which enables one person to feel superior to another. So whether it's color or class or sexuality or whatever it is, it's feeling superior to someone who is the other. And I think that's the underlying problem of people feeling superior to each other rather than being open to learning about the other culture and realizing there are things in their culture that I don't have in my own. I've got gaps in my culture that other people don't have those gaps. So I think when we start to recognize that in every culture or every class, there are qualities and virtues which we don't have, and instead of being resentful that we don't have them and feeling, I don't know, jealous or resentful, just admiring people. Like the English have a historical antipathy towards the French. But if you turn that around and say, well, we don't like the French because we're jealous of them, because we admire their je ne sais quoi, their spontaneity, their emotions, their drama, their je ne sais quoi, their panache, their style. We don't have any of that. So you could say that instead of being resentful, we could become admiring of them instead, because they have qualities that we don't.
Now, if I, as a white person, I mean, I'm Irish origin, but I've got a British passport. If I hate the French, am I racist or am I prejudiced?
It's probably more to do with prejudice, but it's all much of a muchness, feeling superior to someone else. I mean, racism is feeling superior to another race because you feel that they're not coming up to standards that they should, or whatever. I mean,
I think. Go on. Sorry to interrupt you. Go on.
There was a wonderful Baha'i lady from Zimbabwe who was trained in the Netherlands in racism academically at university, and she'd been in the civil war between the whites and the blacks, where Robert Mugabe and Joshua Nkomo were battling against Ian Smith and so on.
Yeah.
And then she moved to Britain, moved to Oxford, and I got to know her. And we had some wonderful chats. And one of the things that occurred to me was that if I feel uncomfortable around black men, it's because I'm intimidated by their superior vitality, the warmth of their hearts, their sociability, their just warmth, and as an Englishman with an English culture, I can't match that to save my life. So instead of feeling uncomfortable, just admit it, Pete, they're superior in their cultural values in many ways, with qualities that I couldn't hope to match. So when we see something that makes us feel uncomfortable, when we turn it around and say, well, it's a quality that I admire really and wish that I had, then you can become positive about them instead. That's my thought.
I love that.
But I've still got a lot of work to do on myself, because I have very bad prejudices against the toffs, the elite. Classes.
Yeah. And I know you're someone who's sort of followed Irish politics, people say, Ireland and England, the Irish hate the English. They don't hate the English.
They remember their history.
It's those toffs that you're talking about. It's the elite who have persecuted the English working class as much as they persecuted the Irish and the rest of the Commonwealth. Probably. Just on the Diane Abbott thing, I think possibly the issue that people have with this, when they say, for example, it's true that many types of white people with points of difference, such as redheads, can experience this prejudice, but they are not all their lives subject to racism. In the pre-civil rights America, Irish people, Jewish people, and travellers were not required to sit at the back of the bus. So it's kind of like a hierarchy of prejudice. I mean, the redhead thing, that's an interesting one. Like someone said, if there is injustice anywhere, is injustice everywhere. But is there a feeling of, well, if racism against black people is worse than discrimination against Irish people in America, for example, well then, is racism against Asians bad but not as bad? And then we get into the whole what happened in the Second World War thing. I mean, what's coming out here, if I'm going to play you a little clip of our friend Sakia, notice how he addresses the Diane Abbott issue.
In my view, what she said was to be condemned. It was anti-Semitic. It's absolutely right that we acted as swiftly as we did. That's the change that you've seen in the Labour Party. But do I condemn what she said? I absolutely condemn what she said. Do I want to show the Labour Party takes this seriously and acts very quickly? Yes, I do. And that's why we acted as swiftly as we did yesterday.
So when she said Jewish people suffer prejudice, Irish people suffer prejudice, traveller people suffer prejudice, but not racism, Keir Starmer comes out and says it was anti-Semitic what she said. He didn't say, oh, it was anti-Irish.
Well, I think his comments are as insane as the whole anti-Corbyn campaign accusing Corbyn of anti-Semitism as well. Complete load of utter tosh. I don't
Corbyn, who's been anti-racist all his life. Let's welcome Andre onto the screen. Andre, say hello to Pete. Pete,
Hi.
This is Andre.
Pete, pleasure to meet you.
Hi there.
Thank you.
Have you caught up with what we've been saying?
You remind me. You look a little bit to me like Philip from Rising Damp with Leonard Rossiter. Have you ever seen that?
That's not funny.
No, he's a wonderful.
I haven't seen it. I can't comment.
He's a wonderful character.
Yeah, he is. A lot
we'll find
darker
a lookalike for you, Pete, as well. Yeah, Andre, did you catch what we've said so far?
I did. I was trying not to come on, to be honest.
Go on then. Welcome.
Well, I was trying to stay
You didn't
off.
want to come on. Sorry, I've pulled you on. We didn't want to. Come on. What do you make of Diane? You must have a view on this.
No, that's what I'm saying to you. I rang in because of some of the comments that was made there, and I thought I needed to to say my little piece on it.
Go for it.
Okay. The Irish went through a lot. They went through a lot. They were called white niggers at one time, if I remember rightly.
Yep.
England put them through a lot, mate. Oliver Cromwell put them through a lot. All right? There is no denying England didn't torture them. They did. They even brought the Scottish in to rule over them because the Scottish were a little bit more pacified. They brought them in to rule over them and abuse them and all. They went through centuries of abuse. Let me make that quite clear. I'm not ignorant to history, okay? I don't know everything about history, but I'm fully aware what they went through. However, there's another side to this. I don't believe there is any race out there that has the right. Well, everyone has the right to do everything. You can say what you want. You can say you're a cat if you want. If you want to call yourself a cat, you can call yourself a cat, call yourself a kitten. Anybody can do what they want. But realistically, I don't believe anyone has the right to compare themselves to black racism and black abuse. And the reason why I say this, for what, there's loads of reasons, but I'll give you one. The Irish went through some serious abuse. The Jews went through serious abuse. The Scots went through serious abuse. After the Battle of Culloden, what Britain done with the Scots was serious. You know, I don't know. It's like trying to control a dog, an aggressive dog, the way they treated them. They really took it out of them. However, what did these people do? Once African slaves were discovered, what did they do? They joined in. They took jobs on the plantations as overseers. Mm-hmm. And then all joined in with the Brits, with the French, with whoever, on abusing them, on blacks, on something that they could never run away from, because your skin tone now became the new level of rank, so to speak, right? And it's gone on. You know, you would think the amount of abuse that the Irish, the Scots, and everyone else had, you would think to yourself, I wouldn't want to put, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. No, not them. My name's McIntyre.
Yeah.
Do you understand? Right. Yeah. And, you know, although I know it was married into the family, why I got that name, but for many, it wasn't.
It wasn't. Yeah, I get you. Look, Andre, I think people are always looking for a way to punch down. And the Indians were regarded as second-class citizens, but the British were happy to send them to Uganda to rule over the third-class citizens, the black people of Uganda and East Africa. Could you
repeat what you just said there, Julian, please?
As much as Indians and Asians, South Asians, were regarded as second-class citizens, the British were happy to send those second-class citizens to rule over third-class citizens, black people in Africa. Similarly, maybe Scottish people were second-class citizens in Britain, but we'll send them to Ulster and Ireland to rule over the third-class Catholic Ireland.
I get your point, but I feel like this is I feel like your point is a ranking system, and the person to blame is Britain. The person to blame is England. The person to blame
is whoever's at the top of the rung. It could be the French in some, or the Belgians.
No. But to answer your point, what you're just saying, England was happy to send them a second class. What about the second class person who's in that position happy to go? What about that?
Yes, they have blame as well. What about
that?
You're right. You're right.
And in India, I could argue that that Indians are more racist than Brits, because I'm not being funny. They've had that casting system for a very long time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. People are always looking for a way to punch down. And if you think you're a second-class citizen, the way you elevate yourself is to say, oh, well, I'm Asian, but at least I'm not black, for example. Or what you'll find in the Holy Land, amongst Israeli society, the Jewish people with heritage and origins from North Africa and the Middle East, the Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews, tend to be further to the right politically and vote for right-wing parties, even though they were treated as second-class citizens when they arrived in Israel and were put in camps and were referred to as Aravim, you're Arab, in an insulting way. Generations later, they are now wanting to be more Israeli than the Israelis, and they tend to vote for the Likud party rather than the Labour Party. So they are further to the right. And more resentful towards their Palestinian neighbours on the whole. Not saying everybody, just that you might find that attitude politically.
I get all of that, but guess what?
Go on.
When you're in an escalator, when you're in a lift, in some, I don't know, hotel or wherever, people aren't putting their bag, women don't pull their bags closer to them because you're Israeli or because you're English or because you're Irish. They put it closer to them because you're a black man walking into the lift. People, when you walk into a pub in, I don't know, some predominantly native part of England, and you walk into the country pub, people don't look around because you're Irish or because you're Scottish or because you're Israeli. They look around because who's this black geezer coming in here? There is certain, I'm not disputing that there isn't racism towards these people, but usually you get that racism once you open your mouth. Once you open your mouth and the Irish accent comes out, the Scottish accent comes out, the Israeli, the Romanian accent comes out, that's when they start, that's when they click and it will kick in. But we only got to walk in and it's there. There's levels to this.
I think that's a great point. And for all that the
There's
Irish
levels
suffered
to
in
this.
the
There's
70s
levels to
and
this.
80s.
And the levels that are, there's levels to this, and the level, we can't run away from it. We're born into it, and there's nowhere we can go. I actually, it's got to the stage, and this is no disrespect, I'm only saying it, I don't actually take offense to it, but it is actually borderline disrespectful to compare other people's racism to black racism. I would actually say that. Obviously, I don't take offense to it. I love the two of you, yeah? But I'm just saying, in theory, when you really sit down and look at what's happened, like when they talk about the Jews, 6 million dying, and that was the genocide was a major bad thing. Of course it was a bad thing. But we didn't even get a flaming look in when the 10 million were killed by King Leopold of Belgium. 10 million. He halved the Congo's population in 10 years. Halved it. Right? That didn't even get a look in. You can't, it is actually offensive to even compare it. When I really think about it even more, what was going on. And I'm not saying you're doing it on purpose. I'm saying the concept of trying to compare black racism with white racism in any form. There was a start date to Irish abuse, and there was a stop date to Irish abuse. Ours continues from the time we were discovered, and from the time ships found a way around the west coast and east coast of Africa, we've been abused.
Wow.
I heard someone say recently that it may be, you could say it dates at least from the Talmud written in Babylon, where there were anti-black racist slurs in the Talmud written by the Jewish rabbis.
Minimum of 2,000 years has there been black abuse in slavery. Minimum of 2,000 years. People keep talking about the transatlantic slave trade like that was the worst. It was bad, but the Swahili coast and the Arabic slave trade was at least 1,500 years before.
Well, Pete mentioned the Barbary slave trade. That was along the North African coast, and the enslaved were white Europeans.
You can't compare it. Again,
well, I'm mentioning it because it's been mentioned. You're saying that the East African slave trade was worse, and that was Arabs against
Let me
black
tell you
people.
why you can't compare it. Let me tell you why I feel. I could be wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But let me tell you why you can't compare it. The Barbary slave trade of the Europeans that were put into slavery had the chance of becoming Janissaries when it came to the Ottoman Turks. All right, and prior to that,
or were forcibly converted.
They were forcibly converted, but they had a chance. They had a chance of becoming. They had a chance of becoming great. Do you understand? Right? Yeah. And the other, we're talking about the Ottomans, which was obviously later. It was 1200s going on. But I'm talking about prior to that, when the Barbary states, you know, and for those who don't know, we're talking about the Moroccans, the what is now Libya, Tunisians, etc. When they were doing slavery, again, they would marry some of the women, and their children were looked upon and would inherit their fathers. Sorry, just a second.
That's right.
Yeah, their fathers would the children were treated as equal, right? And they could grow to greatness and would inherit what the father left. Now, here's the opposite to that. When the women were taken on the slave ships, the slavery shipmen were told to make sure that when they dock in the Caribbean and Americas, make sure they're pregnant. And we're talking about girls from 10 years old upwards. Make sure they're pregnant when they land, because we will bubble if they're pregnant. Do you understand? That's the child of a European. The offspring of the European is in that African woman's stomach, and they didn't feel no way to sell that child on. So once you was caught and put on a ship, there was two ways out: you die, or you work to death. It was as simple as that. And your children are slaves. It's not the same as the Barbary states.
I think you're right. And the big difference about the Barbary slave trade, there are no white European communities living in North Africa today who are still seen as separate, as different, as descendant of slaves. There will be people who will have European DNA. Yeah, but they've been amalgamated. That's the word. The black people of the Caribbean, of the Americas, retained their identity, perhaps because of segregation, for one thing. And the
forcibly put on them. And when they tried to make communities to stop this, what did they do? They burnt them communities down because of jealousy, because they were so successful. Black Wall Street, those of your viewers who don't know about it need to research this. In the 1920s in America, when they were successful, they segregate themselves to become successful. They smashed it apart and ruined it.
They brought in the Air Force to bomb it in 1921. They brought in the US Air Force to bomb it. And I saw very recently a film, Tom Hanks was being interviewed, and he said, "Why didn't I know about this until 6 months ago? You know, I knew about various other things, disasters happening in America. I never heard what happened in Tulsa in 1921. Why have I not been told?" You know, it was very moving.
It slipped my mind, Tulsa. I couldn't remember the word. Thank you very much for reminding me. Yeah. There's so much to remember sometimes with history. You can't remember everything. But do you see now what I'm trying to tell you? You can't compare it.
It goes back further than anything else, perhaps. It's an older racism, an older prejudice.
Can I just?
It's been more brutal.
Sorry to cut you. I'm just going to say one one more point as well, just to prove, just to back what you just. Is it Pete? Did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, Pete. Just to back what you just said as well. I hate referring to things if I can't to reference something if I can't remember the actual reference, but it is in the Bible. It's in the Bible.
Yeah.
Where I think it was it Solomon?
I think it was. Is it this one of the sons of Noah called Canaan?
No. It's not that story. It was
Hamitic theory.
Yeah.
No. It wasn't. It was where this woman was working in the fields, and the son. If I looked it up on my reference, and I've got reference notes, if I would see it in there because I took a reference. But she, I think it was Solomon. Please, I will put a reference in the comments later. But she was approached by one of the prophets of the Bible, basically, and he looked upon her. I think it was Solomon or King David looked, and she turned and said, "No, please don't look at me because I've been blackened by the sun." Now that draws reference to the fact that her skin obviously had darkened her, so it was obviously looked down upon because she had got darker. Do you understand? The Bible is even drawing reference to colorism and racism from back then.
But Pete, I want to ask you about the son of Noah, Ham. What is it in the Bible that suggests that Ham is black? Because we talk about Hamitic languages. The languages of Africa are Hamitic, as in descended from Ham. And is there some passage that suggests that he was made black, or is that something people have read into it? What do you know about that?
I don't know, I'm afraid. All I know is the theory or the myth or the legend that Ham was the progenitor of black people in Africa, and the other sons of Noah were the progenitors of people further north.
So that's Ham, Shem, Japheth, and someone else possibly. Yeah. I know that, and I often mention this in the Belgian Congo and in what became Rwanda. The Belgians who were there, the Catholic Church taught what they called Hamitic theory, and they told the Tutsis that they were descended from Ham and that the Hutus were not. So somehow the Tutsis were regarded as superior. The Belgians kind of exaggerated the differences between them and said, "Oh, your nose is like that. If you're that, you're this. If you look like this, you're." They weren't really in tribes, but the Belgians sort of categorized them into tribes. They gave these Tutsis a superior position within society, which led to resentment. And when the Belgians left in the vacuum of power, the Hutus rose up and, filled with hatred for revenge, massacred a million Tutsis. And it's interesting that sometimes it's the race or tribe that were seen superior who then suffer the genocide afterwards. Similarly, the Alawite Shia Muslims in Syria were given a very and have been left actually in a privileged position in Syria. The French put them into the military. So when the Assad family took power, no surprise that they're Alawis. But should there ever be a certain type of revolution in Syria, if it was a violent ISIS-type revolution, the first people to be massacred would be those privileged minority Alawite Muslims.
That's the key, minority. When you're in the majority, when you're in the majority, that's not the case, is it? Because in America, that wasn't the case, was it? Because the white population outnumbered the blacks. Therefore, remember, Black America only makes up, I think, 15% of America. So therefore, we don't see that problem. But if it was the other way around, you're right, there would be an issue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also thinking of there's a couple of examples. I mean, the Indians in East Africa we mentioned, Protestants in the south of Ireland in the new Free State were now a minority who were perceived to have had a privileged position. Some of the Anglo-Irish families were burned out of their houses. I was going to mention Haiti, the revolution in Haiti, where one of the only times black people did actually overthrow the master and take power. Unfortunately, a few generations later, lighter-skinned descendants of slaves were dominating darker-skinned descendants of slaves. So that caste system that's been drilled into people seems to remain, unless you've got another explanation for that.
That's the continuation of racism. And, you know, I think they call it the Jim Crow theory.
Yeah.
And it's
the segregation laws, right? Jim Crow.
Segregation laws. And what it's done, what's happened with that is it's had 400 years to fester.
Yeah.
Yeah, you understand? 400 years to fester. Remember, this Christian laws that has been pushed on the world, okay, is less than 2,000 years old. It's about 1,500 years old. We didn't think like that. We were all pagans prior to that, apparently. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you know the modern laws of monogamy has really been around for only 1,500 years. I can argue that's why it don't work personally, because I think saying that it works for 25% of the people isn't the majority.
Speak for yourself, Andre. I'm giving it a go.
You're doing brilliant. You're doing brilliant. You're doing brilliant.
This is someone on Twitter saying Diane Abbott has spent all her life fighting racism and has suffered a constant racist abuse while doing so. Anybody now wanting to put the boot in is more than likely doing so for political reasons. Hashtag I stand with Diane Abbott. I've written a piece for the New Statement about Diane Abbott's letter. So this is the guy she was responding to. He seems to be black as well. And she didn't agree with the way that he said everybody could be victims of racism. Andre, you've argued the case very, very well, I must say. I haven't got a lot to come back at you with. I'm sure perhaps some people, maybe David Baddiel, someone in jest is saying David Baddiel plans to spend the next 72 hours making Diane Abbott's suspension all about him. He wrote a book called Jews Don't Count, sort of begrudging the fact that the suffering of the Jewish people doesn't, perhaps in his eyes, get the same attention as the suffering of the black people. I don't want to have the oppression Olympics tonight. You've made the case very, very well. But Jewish people lost 6 million in our lifetime, well, in some people's lifetime. Is it the fact that their suffering is more recent? The fact that we remember it more? I know you're going to say yours is still going on till this day. I'm not going to mention that because I think we all know that's true. Okay, but I have got something else to add to it. Yeah. At least they got their compensation and their reparations. We ain't got nothing. How about that one? Okay. And what's your explanation for that? Is it their white skin? Do I need to give you one? Well, you don't have to. Is it a colour thing? Is that a generation later? My race is on the bottom of everyone else's shoe. Okay. And that's how I see it. Individually, we excel because we live in a world of success. And when someone has done well at sport or done well at something and excel, we love success, if I'm using the right word. Yeah. So therefore, when we look at Muhammad Ali, we don't necessarily see him as black. When we look at Frank Bruno, we don't necessarily see him as black, because success, the green, the color green outdoes any skin tone. Yeah. Okay. If you're making money and Magic Johnson, all these people, they've excelled past the color. Do you understand? Right? But that don't even equate for 10% of the population, I don't think. Mm-hmm. So even for me, sometimes I walk into certain places and for some people,
I swear to that, you know, I feel like I get treated better than probably everyone else around me. But obviously, I come from a successful sporting background, so in certain scenarios, I don't, you know, I feel elevated in certain. I'm made to feel elevated, but I see it when I go to places I'm not known, and then you see it shining through like a beacon. And you don't see the Romanians or the Irish getting treated like that until they open their mouth. And then there may be a little something, but it's not usually like that. Okay? That's my observation.
I saw a very interesting map of the UK which showed the voting areas where people voted for UKIP. In a time when UKIP was campaigning against immigrants. And all the areas where people were not voting for UKIP were big cities where the whole population had ethnic minorities, and they, you know, they had knowledge.
Could you repeat that, Pete? Pete, could you repeat that? So you said a lot of people voted UKIP, but was what? Sorry?
Okay, so this is a map of the UK showing where the main concentrations of UKIP voters were when the UKIP voters were voting in response to UKIP scaremongering about ethnic minorities. The areas which were not voting for UKIP were the big cities where everybody had knowledge of the ethnic minorities in those cities. They knew each other. They got to know a little bit about each other's culture. They knew there wasn't a problem. They didn't vote for UKIP. So it seems to me that one of the big solutions to the whole problem is to reduce our ignorance about the way of life, the culture, the attitudes, the code of morality, the way of being, the take on reality of another culture, and realizing that deep down we're all the same. Deep down.
Pete, you know what it is? There's a saying. Once you go seasoning, you don't go back. And in the cities, you've got Chinese, you've got Caribbean food, you've got Polish food, you've got Arab food. Man can't live on fish and chips alone. Yeah. But in the ethnic, in the native areas, fish and chips and boiled potatoes with salt and pepper is all what you really get, isn't it? So what's happening is once you mix and you understand the cultural diversity,
you appreciate each other.
Why would you, do you know what I mean? Why would you want to go back to?
Yeah, exactly. So it seems to me the answer to the problem is when we find ourselves in situations where we feel uncomfortable or we feel suspicious or we feel awkward, break the ice. You know, like Jim Morrison of the Doors, break on through to the other side, make contact. You know, heart to heart rapport, soul to soul rapport with other human beings. Allow your humanity and your heart to show itself. Make contact and realize we're brothers. It doesn't matter what our cultural background is.
However, I do vote UKIP and I do choose to vote EDL.
Really?
It just ruined everything. But interesting.
Why?
Interesting.
I agree with their
once
policies.
we get to know one another properly, we'll have more respect.
I was surprised one day when I was listening to, what was his name, Nick Griffin of the BNP, and he was talking about foreign policy. I thought, my God, he's saying the right things. I thought, am I agreeing with the leader of the BNP? That's not right. You know.
Well, look, some of the worst people at home get it right abroad. You know, Donald Trump wasn't very nice to some of the people in his own country, but he wasn't keen on starting new wars that hadn't already begun. So it's interesting that you get that dilemma sometimes.
The situation is this. At the end of the day, the way I see it like this, it's took me a long time to get to this viewpoint that I've got now. But I like to look back and research history.
Yeah.
After World War II, Britain, you know, Sheffield, Birmingham, places like that, I heard you had 2 erect houses on a whole street. In some areas, you could count the properties on your hand. The place Hitler bombed the whole of Britain, and all the big cities suffered. You know, sometimes you saw one building in the whole county. It was really, you know, it was really bad. And when my mum came here, my mum said she was invited to come here in the 1950s. She came here and they sent her straight to Leeds and Sheffield. And she said, that's what she said. She said, I've never seen devastation like this before. England wanted to move, the people were exhausted. The country needed to be rebuilt. So they brought in migrant workers from the Caribbean. Pete, Julian, they didn't do it. They didn't bring people in the ones and tens. They brought them in the thousands, 30,000 at a time. And what was happening is that mass migration, that exodus, changed Britain within 10 years.
Wow.
I believe in empowerment, and I believe the only way that empowerment is going to come, and you're going to see a change in Africa, for example, where they can actually start to compete with the rest of the world and get organized, is with mass diaspora migration. I don't believe Africa will change with just me going over there or just with two people going over there. It needs to be a mass migration of intellect. I'm not saying the people over there don't have sense,
Back
but
to
I'm
Africa,
saying,
yeah?
sorry?
A back to Africa type movement. Is that what you're looking for?
It needs to be a back to Africa type movement, because I'm all for people going back to the Caribbean as well, but I say Africa because going back to the Caribbean is not going to change the lives of my race. What is going to change the lives of my race is the exodus back to Africa, because Africa has the world's resources. Once we are in charge of that, we will empower our race worldwide. Therefore, I believe in the message from EDL and from the BNP in the sense of go home.
But not being kicked out, go home because you want to do something.
No, I'm happy to be kicked out. If they're going to kick us out, they're going to kick us out as an exodus, isn't it? It's going to be a mass migration. So therefore, that was...
Exodus movement of
the people. So I actually believe...
Was that what he was talking about? I mean, I know... So Bob Marley, a Rastafarian, they equate the people, the black peoples of the Caribbean as the Israelites and wanting to go back to Africa like the lost Israelites wanting to go back to the Holy Land. I mean, they even call Africa Zion, right?
Jules, the majority of people here make it quite clear, but we are guests here, even though we're born here. I was born here. We're guests. That's number one. Number two, my own bones don't like being here at my age now. I suffer with, you know, it affects my bones. Something's telling me that I need heat, and I know I'm not alone. Therefore, we need the exodus. But one person can't make a change. We need to do what England done. It was a masterstroke in genius what they done in the 1950s, bringing over the Caribbeans in mass like that. It changed everything, and it got us back. It got the nation back up on its feet straight away. I do not believe in racism. Okay, and I think you know by the way we interject with, you know, we interlink with each other. But I believe I'm a pragmatist. I've got to look at the situation at hand, what I see at the moment. And the fact of the matter is sometimes there's no point fighting against people. Sometimes you have to listen to the argument, and the point they put across actually serves my purpose. That's my viewpoint. That's how I see it. I speak to Africans all the time that are over there, and there's a lot of ignorance going on. There's a lot of tribal ignorance going on over there. So I don't see why people are here fighting against the fact that we're not wanted. You know, look at the Ukraine war. They're asking the whole world, including Africa, which is a bit of a cheek, to help them and back them against Russia when Russia has done a lot for Africa. But they're asking they're asking African countries to take side with them against Russia. But yet, look how they treated their black students, their African students, when the war started.
And there was a South African statesman saying, if Putin arrives here, we will pick him up from the airport. Putin is welcome here. He's not our enemy. The South Africans are clear about that, rightly or wrongly, you can understand why they don't want to be part of America or Britain's proxy war. The people that conquered them, it's nothing to do with them, and they would welcome help from Russia. As I say, I'm not.
There's 30. It's not just. It started with South Africa, but there's now 30 African countries, 30 that openly declare, but they will always back Russia. 30, and I'm not saying Russia's an angel, but what I will say is they have a long history since the 1960s of helping to free African countries, and that's a fact. They sent weaponry and aid to Angola. They sent weaponry and aid to Ethiopia. They sent weaponry and aid to the Congo to help deal with this crisis. What's going on over there? At the end of the
time
day,
of the Soviet Union, isn't it?
The Soviet Union and up to today.
And up to today. Well, I mean, if Mozambique have got a Kalashnikov on their flag, that should tell you who helped them to be empowered. One more point I want to mention. Diane Abbott, Labour MP, has accused the government of putting lives of Yemeni Jews at risk by not doing enough to save them from Al-Qaeda and other Islamic extremists. So Yemeni Jews, Diane Abbott was supporting them all those years ago. This is 13 years ago now. So there's your anti-Semite for you. If you think that Diane Abbott and Jeremy Corbyn are anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish, she was trying to help Jews in Yemen, for example, 13 years ago. And the people throwing stones at her probably don't even know that there are Jews from Yemen. Putin is based and focusing on Russia first. Western nations focus on the EU or some other global trade pact first. That's from Peter. Thank you, Peter. And the picture I was showing you was Keir Starmer with that Stephen Lawrence's mother, Doreen, and it's been 30 years since he was murdered. He said, "I'm determined we'll do all we can to stamp out racism in our society and remove barriers to opportunity for young people in Britain." This is Stephen's legacy. But then when a black woman from his own party gave her views on racism, whether you agree or disagree, he chastised her. He removed the whip for expressing her views on the racism against black people. Pretty crazy, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Not much to say to that.
Yeah. Well, Andre, I really want to thank you. Pete, I really want to thank you. Gentlemen, I hope we'll try and do this every Monday. You don't have to show up every week, but whenever you can, pair of you, great to have you on. And Pete, any topic you want to bring to the table, throw it my way, mate. It's your channel as much as mine.
Peter, sorry, can I just ask Peter a question? What did he think about it? Because you didn't say much. You didn't say much when I was saying. And what's your view? What's your verdict on what? Was there anything I said wrong? Did you do anything you don't agree with?
No. I thought everything you said made a lot of sense to me. I had no issue with anything you said. I thought that, I think everything you said was fine.
Have you been to Africa, Pete? Have you travelled the world? No. Andre,
I worked in a job centre for 29 years.
Oh wow! You've probably seen every country in the world walk past.
Especially in Oxford. And in Oxford, I found that every now and again there'd be a young black man who was unemployed and came to my desk because his ticket brought me to my desk when he was signing on, and he would sit down very often and look dejected because I looked the part. Short back and sides haircut, white pilot shirt with epaulettes and breast pocket full of pens, short sleeves, a tie, and expecting the worst, sort of British officialdom. But when I was starting to read from my internal autocue and I had to read my stuff, I would try to speak from my heart to a fellow human being. And more than maybe half a dozen times, it was like scratching to make a racist pun, if you like, scratching a layer of soot, and sunshine would come pouring out because the guy would feel, he's got a heart-to-heart rapport, you know, and it would make him happy. And that happened quite a number of times, and it was a joy. And to me, it made the whole job worthwhile.
Because they didn't expect it from you, and unexpected
no,
kindness is like
I didn't look the
even
part.
more.
But when I spoke, I created that rapport because I believe passionately in the oneness of the whole human race, and it cheered people up.
Pete, have you noticed within my race how good we do at sport?
Yeah.
Collectively, how well we do at sport.
Which sports, Andre? Not all sports.
Have
now.
you noticed
all of them? White men can't jump.
Right. Have you noticed who the coaches are?
Kenya.
Sorry, Jules I'm trying to take over. He doesn't realise that this is his show, but we're the guests.
Go for it, Andre. Go for it. I've got Balzo joining in as well, who I'm going to bring in. But
Pete, have you noticed? Pete,
Balzo, you're joining in, but we've got Andre at the moment. Go on, sir.
Yeah, well, Kenya seems to do very well in the Olympics.
No, but I'm saying, have you noticed who the trainers are, the coaches are? Have you noticed? Right. Usually Europeans.
Aha.
If you go to any of the boxing gyms, 90-something% of the coaches who are training people like, I don't know. I mean, obviously you got Mike Tyson and different coaches. I know there are trainers now. There's a lot more trainers now who are black, but a lot of the trainers were white. You see in basketball, you see in most of the sports, right? And that is because when we're treated as equal or treated with some TLC, we excel.
Yeah.
And all we're asking is to be treated. We're not asking to matter, because we're more than a matter. Yeah. But what we're asking for is a bit of TLC. And once we get that TLC, we excel to the benefit of all of us. So what you said is very, very important. That's very, I felt that when you said it about the chap in the office.
Yeah. It reminded me actually, Pete, of when I met Leo Muhammad of the Nation of Islam in Hyde Park. And I was expecting him to be a little bit negative towards me. And he gave me the warmest hello and the firmest handshake, and really sort of just took me aback. And I agreed with everything he said that day. And in the middle of his speech up at Speaker's Corner, a butterfly came and landed on his chest. And it was a sort of a little moment. We've got a friend joining, Balzo. You are in the chat if you can hear me and you want to say anything. Go for it. Or maybe you're not really there. Balzo, your screen is black, but I think we can hear you. Maybe he just wanted to be in the room. All right, Balzo, never mind. Maybe next time, mate. Look, gentlemen, this has been Lessons for Life. Dardasha saying, can you conclude by introducing your guests? I missed the beginning. Well, we'll go around. Hello, I'm Julian from Lessons for Life. In the red T-shirt and glasses, it is Pete. Pete, welcome along. Below him, you've got, who are you, sir? Andre, me? Introduce yourself.
Andre McIntyre.
Oh, and we got Balzo. Hello, Balzo.
Oh,
is there anything you would like to say? You are live on Lessons for Life.
Oh, well,
what do you make of Diane Abbott?
It's an absolute pleasure. But basically, you taught me, so I just want to come back and just say thanks for teaching me.
I hope it was a long time ago. Are you over 18?
Yeah, I'm like 24 now, so yeah, it's calm.
Oh, well, that's all right then.
I say it was the poetry lesson that just really got to me. So, but the live stream's been fantastic. I've really learned a lot, so I've just got to thank you. So,
Balzo, you're so welcome, mate. I really appreciate that. There you go, a little magic moment at the end of our show. We'll do it every night, Monday night, from 10 o'clock. and I hope you guys will join me. Well done, gentlemen. Well,
Nice
that's
to
a
meet you,
relief.
Greg.
I thought he was going to come on and swear at me, but that was nice.
You see how it's so important. You know, I learned this from my Facebook. You know, sometimes on Facebook, I mean, I've got like 4,000 people, 5,000 people on my Facebook. But what happens is not everyone likes or comments on my posts. But then you'll meet someone, but then I can see the views that I've got, and it's a lot of views. And then sometimes I'll be walking in my hometown and people say, oh, as soon as I come on Facebook, your page is the first one I look at when I'm online.
Andre, you know Rizzo from Reading? The
Yes.
rapper. He said to me, he goes, people don't give likes, they give looks.
I like that.
Yeah.
And it's true. You know, you just don't know who's listening. And Bozo coming on and saying that, it touched me, to be honest.
There you go. Superb. Gentlemen, great show tonight. Really appreciate it. See you next week, same time, same place. We were here and we're gone.